Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, just issued a dire warning about the state of the economy. He doesn't buy Fed's promise about the soft landing and warned that the US economy is headed into the most anticipated economic catastrophe in its history. Jamie Dimon became the CEO of JP Morgan back in 2006, and since then, he has become the most powerful banker in the world. He controls trillions of dollars, and his influence goes way beyond the borders of the United States. While Wall Street was blinded by the greedy profits back in 2008, Jamie Dimon welcomed the 2008 financial crisis with open arms and massively profited from it. So let's find out, why is he skeptical about Fed's promise about the economy? Why doesn't he believe what J. Paul is saying? And why does he think that the US economy is headed into such a catastrophe? In his annual letter to shareholders that he recently released, he highlighted that global inflation will keep rising due to ongoing fiscal spending, remilitarization of the world, restructuring of global trade, capital needs of the new green economy, and possibly higher energy costs. Prior to 2022, most countries around the world, especially European and NATO countries, didn't really spend much on their military. Take Germany, for example, the largest economy in the European Union. It spent around 1% of its GDP on its military. But as the geopolitical situation in Europe and across the world started to change, they realized that we cannot continue like that. We have to keep increasing our military spending in order to face the challenges of the 2022 and 2023. More military spending will definitely lead to more inflation, and more inflation across the world will certainly affect the United States. And if you add that up to the inflation that we have created around 4 years ago, it will add up and make the situation much worse. In the face of the war in Ukraine, global defense spending rose 9% to a record $2.2 trillion. Back in 1970s, when China started opening itself up to the world realized that they can actually reduce the cost of manufacturing by shifting their manufacturing to a country where the cost of labor is significantly lower. And China, one of the countries with the highest population in the world and poorest population in the world, moving manufacturing to China meant reducing costs for US companies and making more profits, and even making a lot of products accessible to the average consumer. That's why US companies spend billions of dollars, probably potentially trillions of dollars, to move the manufacturing from the United States to China. And products such as iPhone became a luxury that most people can now afford. I mean, if the iPhone was produced in a country like the United States or any European country, the cost of iPhone will be at least 3 or 4 times higher than it's right now. I'm not saying that iPhones are cheap, but they will easily be like 3 or 4 or maybe 5 times higher than they are right now, which will make them inaccessible for the vast majority of people, not just in the United States, but across the globe. But in 2020, that began to change. Yes, first of all, we had COVID that disrupted the global supply chain, and now we have to reinvest billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars, to restore the global chip supply chain. But countries such as Russia and China made their intentions clear. They told the world that you're not ready to accept the current world order where we are inferior to the West. We want to be as equal as the United States and Europe on the global stage, which is why they started taking massive action to reshape the global world order that the United States set after World War II. This is not something that just started in 2022. I mean, if you just go back to Trump presidency back in 2016, he started a trade war with China, because if you look at the trajectory, it was clear that time is going to come when China is going to challenge the United States. So the US government started warning US companies to move away their supply chains from China. And some of the largest companies in the country, such as Apple, already started working on moving their manufacturing from China to places like India, which is why if you take a look at the statistics today, a large portion of iPhones today are manufactured in India. The biggest challenge is that there is a very short window where US companies can move away entirely from China. Because if there is going to be a conflict between, as the risk of conflict between China and the US is rising, The companies have to move away, because if they don't move away, they will lose everything if there is going to be a conflict. So think about what's happening right now. US companies have spent trillions of dollars over the course of the last 50 years to build the global supply chain. And now, because of the changes in the geopolitical situation across the globe, these companies have to shift that global supply chain from China to countries such as India, Vietnam, Thailand in a very short period of time, which means that they will have to spend massively to do that, which will raise the cost of goods, which will lead to higher inflation. That's one of the main reasons why Jamie Dimon is confident that inflation is going to stop. There is a real risk in front of us, and that risk will drive prices higher. Another thing that Jamie Dimon noted to pay attention to are energy prices. Now, if you take a look at what's happening, the global economy runs on oil. Yes, oil is an infinite resource, and one day we'll run out of oil. But as of 2024 and the next few years, the world pretty much still depends on oil. Most of the trucks that deliver everything from your iPhone to the groceries are delivered by trucks that run on gasoline. So if you take a look at the oil prices the last 4 months, they have risen from $70 to around $85. So that ship that should deliver your products from China is going to think about raising their prices. Amazon is going to think about raising their prices. The people who sell through Amazon will think about raising their prices. So the end consumer is, at the end of the day, is going to pay much more. But if you zoom out for a moment and take a look at what's happening in the world, even though that the United States is self-sufficient when it comes to energy, it's a capitalistic country. So whenever there are crises in the world and oil prices start rising, it will impact the domestic market in the United States. Take Russia, for example. It's the third manufacturer and the producer for oil, and now it's under sanction. And as long as it's under sanction, Russian oil is not going to flow into the market. That will create shortage of oil in the market, and a shortage of oil will lead to higher prices, and higher prices will impact the global inflation, including the inflation that is in the United States. There is also a new conflict that is brewing up in the Middle East. So if there is going to be a crisis between Israel and Iran, for example, and that will impact the Hormuz Strait, where 30% of global oil supply comes from. So if there is a crisis and Iran stops or blocks the ships from there, there will be massive deficit of oil in the market, which will lead to a catastrophic increase in prices across the globe. That includes the United States as well. That leads us to a very natural question. Why hasn't the economy collapsed yet? Despite all the risks that Jamie Dimon mentioned, he stated that the US economy continues to show that it's resilient against all of these problems. So a lot of people might think that the US economy is simply too powerful to be affected by these crises. But the reality is that resilience by the US economy comes from a huge government deficit. When I talk to people, I clearly see that people still have no idea how much money the government printed back during the COVID. It's not just a few $1 billion or hundreds of billions of dollars. It's literally trillions of dollars. And that's something very difficult for a lot of people to comprehend because they cannot imagine these numbers. And because the Fed kept interest rates at around 0% for nearly 2 years, a lot of companies took very best advantage out of it. People might think that the Fed lowered the rates so much because companies that are struggling, they will have access to the capital and they won't collapse during COVID when they have to fire their people, when they are not working, when people are forced to stay at home. But that's not what happened. Like if you just teleport yourself to 2020, the biggest companies that took advantage out of these low interest rates are the largest companies in the country. We're talking about Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. These companies borrowed as much money as possible. Of course, the government also distributed massive stimulus checks to the rest of the country, but these were the biggest beneficiaries of low interest rates. When you can borrow money for free, there is no reason not to borrow. Because if the interest is nearly 0%, if you pay back that money like 50 years from now, there won't be a lot of interest on it. So the main reason why the US economy hasn't collapsed to this day is because it's still running on all of that money that was borrowed during 2020 and 2021. And according to Jamie Dimon, that money is going to run away in 2024. And that's when the US economy will have a reality check. That leads us to the next question: when the crisis is going to happen. If you have been watching the news, then you know that there is a lot of talk around soft landing. A soft landing is basically when the Fed starts raising interest rates, but at the same time, the economy does not slide into a recession. Yes, the growth is going to slow down to a certain extent, but there will not be a recession, because a recession is most likely going to impact the average people, the average American. Like, the companies will have to fire their people and reduce costs to a certain extent. People will start losing their jobs. And that's something the Fed wants to avoid. But Jamie Dimon is saying that that is not happening. There is only 30 to 40% chance that there will be soft landing. But Chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell, is saying that there is an 80% chance. So according to Jamie Dimon, it's very, very unlikely that there will be a soft landing and there will be a correction in the stock market and the economy overall. Recessions usually happen after 2 years of the Fed raising interest rates. You see, when the Fed raises interest rates, yes, it will have an immediate impact on the market, especially on the companies that really struggling, the companies that highly depend on raising capital. And that's why if you go back to 2022, we had a lot of bankruptcies one after another. But the economy overall wasn't really impacted instantly, because when the Fed raises interest rates, there needs to be some time for those high interest rates to have a real impact on the economy. And that period is around 2 years. So if you do the math, that 2 years is going to be the end of 2024 or maybe the beginning of 2025, because that 2 years is not like the exact period. It could be something around 2 years. Like, if you just go back to 2004, that's when the Fed started raising interest rates. And the Fed picked them at around 5.5% in 2006. And 2 years after that, we had the housing market, because those high interest rates had massive influence over the market and created that recession. Will the history repeat itself? Very likely, according to the annual letter that Jamie Dimon has issued recently. But as history also shown us is that financial crises or recessions are the best period to make a lot of money. These are the times where you can jump into the market and buy great stocks at a huge discount. Like, the best period to buy a house was in the peak of the 2008 financial crisis. The people who understood how the market works, they jumped in and they started buying assets. But to do that, you have to prepare yourself. So hold into your cash, but most importantly, prepare yourself, educate yourself, and be ready for that. For those who want to learn how to start investing, check out the Intelligent Investing Academy, the best place on the internet that will teach you everything you need to know to start investing. Over 3,000 people have already taken the program and are very satisfied with the results. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.